Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator Rubio. Senator Warner?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Brennan, again for your testimony today. You know, one of the things I think we've heard from a number of my colleagues, and we had this discussion when we discussed the committee study on detention and interrogation, is to how should you be confirmed, how do we ensure that the CIA director is always going to be well informed? And particularly we've questioned you today about a number of key sensitive programs.
We've got it.
The nature of the agency's work is that a lot of these programs are disparate, varied.
We've got another half hour, 40 minutes
and
to make it 5:30.
There needs to be some ability to measure objectively the success of these programs, not simply by those individuals that are implementing the programs. And while this is not the setting to talk about any individual of these programs, I guess what I'm interested in is pursuing the conversation we started about how you might set up systems so that, to the best extent possible, as the CIA director, you're going to make sure what's going on, get an accurate, objective review, and not simply have the information that simply bucks up through the system.
Yes, that's an excellent point, Senator, one that I'm very concerned about. In order to have objective measures of effectiveness, the metrics that you want to be able to evaluate the worth of a program, you cannot have the individuals who are responsible for carrying it out. Whether, as hard as they might try, they cannot help, I think, view the program and the results in a certain way. They become witting or unwitting advocates for it. So what we need to do is to set up some type of system where you can have confidence that those measures of effectiveness are being done in the most independent and objective way. And that's one of the things that I want to make sure I take a look at if I were to go to the agency. Again,
the nature of so many programs, all very sensitive in nature, you have to have almost, as we discussed, probably not an IG-type vehicle, something that is more run out of the director's office, but you've got to have some kind of red team that's going to be able to check this information out to make sure that you've got, so that you hear colleagues here press on what would you have done or could have done or should have done, or if you had that oversight, you got to have that objective information to start with.
Absolutely, and I tend to have a reputation for being a detail person, and having been an analyst in an intelligence office for many years, I need to see the data. I cannot rely just on some interpretation of it. So I do very much look forward to finding a way that the director's office can have this ability to independently evaluate these programs so that I can fairly and accurately represent them to you. I need to be able to have confidence myself.
As you know, and we all know, our country is grappling with enormous fiscal challenges, and that means, well, national security remains our most essential requirement for our national government. Everything is going to have to be able to be done in a fiscally constrained period. How are you going to think about thinking through those challenges on where cuts, changes need to be made, and if you could specifically outline one of the concerns that I have is kind of the division of labor and appropriate roles between the CIA and the DoD SOCOM operations. It feels whether that kind of potential buildup in that capacity is, how do we get that done, and in a way of these tight budget times? If you could address both those, I'd appreciate it.
In a fiscally constrained environment, we have to make sure more than ever that every single dollar that's dedicated to intelligence is going to be optimized. And in fact, if sequestration kicks in, what I wouldn't want to do as CIA director is do the salami slicing, which is 5% off the top of all the programs, because all programs are not.
One of the reasons why we need to make sure sequestration.
That's absolutely right. Because it's going to have a devastating impact on the national security of this country. And so I would want to make sure, even if that doesn't happen in a fiscally constrained environment, that I look at the programs and prioritize. And we really have to take a look at what are those programs that we really need to resource appropriately. As we're going to have, and we've had some benefits from pulling folks out of Iraq, and with the continued drawdown of forces in Afghanistan, there's going to be some resource and assets that we're going to have to reallocate there. So I'll look very carefully at that. So what I want to do is to make sure that if I go to CIA, I have an understanding about exactly how these monies are being spent. Then, as you point out, there is quite a bit of intelligence capability within the Defense Department, and I know there have been recent press reports about the clandestine human service, defense clandestine service. and its work with, in fact, CIA, I want to make sure that these efforts are not going to be redundant whatsoever. And I've had conversations with Mike Morrell as well as with General Flynn over at DIA to make sure that these efforts are going to truly be integrated and complementary, because we cannot have unnecessarily redundant capabilities in this government, particularly in an environment that we have right now on the fiscal front.
I think this is an area that's going to need a lot of attention and a lot of oversight. I get concerned at times that the IC on one hand and the DOD on the other hand think they're coming from separate originators of funding, and ultimately they still have to be within the greater budget constraints. Let me, I know my time is running down. Your background and most of your expertise has been on the CT side. Clearly the challenge we've got is we see emerging threats from parts of the world that we're not on the front line, as we see disruptions through the particularly through the Middle East, where perhaps in retrospect we didn't have the right kind of coverage on social media and onto the street. You know, how do we make sure that we're going to get within the kind of fiscal constraints, that we don't go complete CT, that we make sure we've got the coverage we need, the capabilities we need, and the worldwide coverage we need with your approach, particularly with your background, if you can address that?
Well, clearly, counterterrorism is going to be a priority area for the intelligence community and for CIA for many years to come, just like weapons proliferation is as well. Those are enduring challenges. And since 9/11, the CIA has dedicated a lot of effort, and very successfully. They've done a tremendous job to mitigate that terrorist threat. At the same time, though, they do have this responsibility on global coverage. And so what I need to take a look at is whether or not there has been too much of an emphasis on the CT front. As good as it is, we have to make sure that we're not going to be surprised on the strategic front in some of these other areas, to make sure we're dedicating the collection capabilities, the operations officers, the all-source analysts, social media, as you said, the so-called Arab Spring that swept through the Middle East. It didn't lend itself to traditional types of intelligence collection. There were things that were happening in a populist way, that you know, having somebody well positioned somewhere who can provide us information is not going to give us that insight. Social media, other types of things. So I want to see if we can expand beyond the soda straw collection capabilities that have served us very well, and see what else we need to do in order to take into account the changing nature of the global environment right now, the changing nature of the communication systems that exist worldwide.
Well, again, thank you for that. I just would, again, back to my first point, and my time's about out. I do think, should you be confirmed, that trying to make sure you've got that objective oversight, the ability to make sure that you have the best knowledge and best metrics possible, so that when future challenges arrive, you can come to this committee and others and make sure that the President and this committee is informed with the best information possible. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator. Mr. Brennan, so you can be advised, we are not going to do the classified hearing following this. We will do it Tuesday at 2:30. We will, however, do another round just with 5 minutes per senator, so people can wrap up whatever it is they want to ask. I hope that's okay with you.
Absolutely, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you.